Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Real Truth About Health Conference, and to all the people seeing this on their computer or even on replay at a future date. Thank you for joining us. This next speaker is of personal interest to me. Many years ago, I read a book by John Robbins called Diet for a New America. I thought it was a fantastic book. It greatly influenced me. And over the last 20 years, I've seen many people refer to this book and think it was a life-changing book. Years later, I read The China Study by T. Colin Campbell, and I thought, wow, that was really a magnificent book with great information. I was very influenced by many other books. Brian Clement's book, Killer Fish, I thought was great. Gabriel Cousins' book, There Is a Cure for Diabetes, I thought was a fantastic book. At the beginning was very powerful. But if someone said to me today, of all the authors and all the speakers and all the topics and all the possible things that I could focus on, should it be about the bees or the bats, or should it be about sugar or antibiotic-resistant bacteria, or should I be concerned about hormones? What, of all the things that I can focus on, because there's so many things to be concerned about, where should I start? Where is the very first thing that I should do? I would recommend that everyone in the United States and everyone in the world contact every one of their friends, every one of their contacts, and tell everyone on the planet to read the book Food Choice and Sustainability immediately. If you read 5 pages a night for the next whatever you have to do, I feel like this book should be on the cover of every newspaper every day, reminding people to read this book. The information in it is easy to understand. It's not complicated. But it seems like it should be before we're allowed to eat food, everyone should have to read this. If this was 1920 and everyone was smoking cigarettes, you would want someone to come up and say, listen, before you smoke cigarettes, I want you to know there's information about it that you might not be aware of. Now, 90 years later, we're aware of what that information is. In 20 years, everyone on the planet will probably know everything that's in this book. There's no reason to wait 20 years. If you have children or you know anyone under the age of 50 that you care about, you need to read the book Food Choice and Sustainability. I would like to tell you what it says, but I feel that I wouldn't be able to do it as well. The book is simple, it's clear, and just so you know, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to be nice to Dr. Richard Oppenlander, who I met yesterday for the first time. What happened is I read his other book, Comfortably Unaware, and I guess I was driving my wife crazy because I would read it at night, and I was like, oh, no, can I just read you one passage? And she's like, one passage, that's it. And then like a minute later, it's like, I got to read you this. And she was saying, you can't read me any more passages. And I realized I couldn't hold this in. I was bursting out. I didn't know who to tell. I was shocked. I was like, how is this information not on the front page of every newspaper in the country every single day of the year? How come President Obama doesn't start all his lectures by saying everyone needs to read Food Choice and Sustainability? So I called up Richard, and I emailed him, and I begged and pleaded, and I said, we desperately need you. Your piece of information has to be at this conference. I originally saw him. John McDougall has these wonderful 3-day advanced conferences that Richard spoke at, and I saw him for the first time. And then I read the book, and I spoke to Brian Clement about it, and he said, oh, yeah, that's the book to read. So I'm not saying to read this because I want to be nice to Richard. I read the book, and then I sought out Richard, and I said, please be part of this. I desperately want people to read this. And sometimes you speak to people in your life, and you tell them something, and they're like, no, I don't think that's true. I don't believe you. And the reason they're saying that is because that's not what they're reading. It makes sense. Why should they believe what you believe? They're reading other things. The newspaper and the magazines are saying other things. And so if the newspaper or magazine says something else, that would make sense that that's what they would believe. That is why people have to read this and understand what is being said. And when people have read it with their own eyes, then we'll all be in the same place to discuss this. So I'm very excited to have Dr. Richard Oppenlander here, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Well done, Steve. Very well done. I'll pay you later. No, it's so kind. Well, good morning, New York. Oh, gosh, come. You can do better than that. The city that never sleeps, isn't it? Let's try that again. Good morning, New York. Good morning. Oh, that's much better. Okay. What if I told you, and please remember that this is an imaginary, hypothetical, pretend situation that I'm going to talk about next. But what if I told you in an imaginary, hypothetical, pretend way that there's a bomb? No. There's a nuclear warhead located in this room right now, set to go off in, let's say, an hour. And I don't get up and leave just yet because in this pretend situation, the doors are all locked. You can't get out. You're all stuck here. But I happen to know where this hypothetical nuclear warhead is located. I also happen to know how to defuse it, but it'll take everyone's effort here together to do so. And then it becomes quite easy. Do you think if I told just a few people in the audience about this nuclear warhead and where it's located and how to defuse it, that you could help me spread the word to everybody else in the room about this imminent threat before it goes off? So, yeah, sure. So we could solve the problem. We could defuse the bomb before the hour's up, right? Sure we could. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if I knew where it was. I knew how to defuse it. I told a few people. You spread the word and helped me, and we made it happen within an hour. Easy, right? Now, with a quick show of hands, how many people would want to help me do that? Spread the word, defuse the bomb. Oh, not everyone, huh? I see how it's going to be. It's tough New York audience. In reality, there's a serious threat to our existence as we speak. But instead of being confined just to this one theater room, the real-life threat affects our entire planet, and it affects all life on it. Just like this, the doors being locked in this room, we're all stuck here on this once and still potentially beautiful planet. We can't get out. Instead of the all-or-none example of the pretend nuclear warhead exploding, though, this real-life threat occurs over a period of time, sort of like a cancerous bomb, going off a little here and a little there until finally maybe one mega explosion at the end when we don't really have anything left. Much like the pretend example in this room I presented, though, we're in control of the outcome if we do the right thing. Spread awareness, act together quickly enough in the right manner. We have a little more than an hour to solve this problem together, but both figuratively and literally, but not much more than a couple of years. That's it. The bomb I'm talking about in real life is the effect we have on our planet caused by our choice to eat animals. Something quite simple to solve, but oh my goodness, just so difficult to believe. And then even more difficult to do something about, trust me. Which underscores the most pressing issue we have as a society. And if anyone thinks that's an overly dramatic statement, then that needs to be plugged in, and that becomes part of the problem, doesn't it? Well, let's see what I mean by all of this. Many of the choices we make in life will have a profound impact on something else in the world. This is especially true with things we consume, like food. It's one of the major disconnects we seem to have. What you do here might affect something over there, and how to start looking outside of the microcosm or the bubble that each of us tends to live in, and then perhaps how to encourage others to do the same. How does your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, for instance, what you choose to eat today, have anything at all with this shaman from the Amazon area or one of the 2 billion people in the world without water, or the imminent extinction of a number of species on Earth, or the plight of this starving child in Ethiopia, or even the taxes that I have to pay or should pay this year to our government? What possibly could you and the food you choose to eat have anything to do with these things? And why should you care? And how is this all related to some ticking bomb going off? Well, I stopped eating animals nearly 40 years ago when I was in graduate school, primarily from a health and environment standpoint, but also because of the animal research I was involved with at that time, which I still do. But now it's more of this type of animal research, perhaps in a jungle, a remote area, getting a better grasp on what sustainability really does in fact mean. So that would have to include researching animals like these at the largest dairy operations in the world and some of the smallest ones as well. And these grass-fed or pastured livestock operations here in the U.S. and in many, many countries overseas. This happens to be in the U.K. I think that guy really liked me. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the cow. And I've researched quite a few farms like these. We certainly can't leave fish out of the equation now, can we? Well, we're going to examine the word sustainable pretty carefully because it's frequently misused. Recently, it's been morphed into so many different meanings to suit so many different needs, and it's the latest buzz. I mean, you see this word everywhere. For most people, it refers to our energy sector, how many miles per gallon of gas your car can achieve, how many energy-efficient light bulbs you can switch out to save electricity, and to waste, how, what, and when to recycle, many times up to composting. Often, we might think of economic or social sustainability, but rarely is food choice connected to sustainability efforts, especially the raising and eating of animals, despite the enormous effect. It's simply too challenging for everyone, culturally, socially. I call all this global depletion, the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health. It's still sustainability. I just think we need to hear it from a different direction, and we need to hear the whole story through an unfiltered lens. How many here are familiar with the work of Jamie Oliver, or Mark Bittman, or Michael Pollan, of course? Yeah, about the industrialization of foods, high fructose corn syrup, eating less meat. Important? Sure. Yeah, but these are just fragments of the picture. We need to move beyond all that and understand the entire picture, the sustainability of our planet, our resources, and ourselves. And to do this, we need to always include topics such as loss of biodiversity, world hunger, sustainability of our own health, of course, water scarcity, agricultural land use inefficiencies, and the state of our oceans and fish, and climate change. These are all connected by food choice. They're all involved in the bomb that's ticking away, gradually going off around us. The story always begins with these two numbers. There's 7.2 billion people living on our planet today, 240,000 added every single day. So control of the growth of our population is an issue, but it's not nearly so much of the problem as the number on the right, what we're doing to the planet. The number on the right represents the fact that there are more than 70 billion animals living on our planet that we raise and eat for food each year, and it repeats itself year after year in growing numbers. And that's the problem. In fact, this 70 billion number is quite impossible to pin down, and it's very much on the light side because on any given day you may find up to 1.7 trillion chickens and up to 1 to 2 trillion fish in the world on their way sooner or later going off to slaughter that year. Let's look at a graphic about global depletion. Certainly there are other industries that contribute to this picture, but none have the comprehensive impact. Just how serious is this depletion? Well, as I said, it's very. In some cases, it's irreversible and spiraling downward quickly. That is the cancerous bomb. All of these systems that you see are affected. Simply put, we're in vast overshoot mode, demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. It would take 1.5 to 2 full Earths. In the United States, it's 3.5 Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet. And most of this is due to our choice, because of our choice to eat animals. It's serious enough on its own merit, but it's made much more so because of all the layers and layers of various influences that tend to bury the problem and bury its solution. We just don't want to deal with it. And we can put every other major problem in the world at the top of the list to fix. As Steve said, Obama should be talking about this every single day. But this one never gets to be fixed. And yet this is the world. Now, what's critical for everyone to understand is that this isn't just a factory farm issue. Not at all. It's a raising animals to eat issue. And we're going to see that as we go along. We humans have reached a critical and a fragile point in our evolutionary journey as a species. Just in the last 100 years, a blink of an eye in terms of time, we've reached the Anthropocene era, where we've acquired the power to positively, but mostly negatively, affect our biosphere, the litho, hydro, and atmosphere, the very environs that sustain us and sustains all other life on Earth. Unfortunately, we haven't acquired the wisdom or the maturity to be able to manage this power in a sensible or beneficial manner. We're essentially in the adolescent phase of our place in the big history. And we've reached a bottleneck of sorts. one that many experts predict that we may not be able to work our way through as a species. But there is a way. Let's refine our thoughts on global warming or climate change. First, we need to remember that global warming is just one component of the much larger, more profound problem of global depletion, the more total effect we have on our planet. And the most important thing anyone can do about global warming or global depletion is take a good look at what's on their plate, specifically all foods derived from fish and livestock. And yes, that has to include dairy, ice cream and milk and cheese and yogurt, even eggs. They're all part of the problem. This widely cited study that most of us are familiar with was shocking when it first appeared. I mean, how could the meat everyone's eating cause more greenhouse gas emissions than all the cars, trucks, planes, and trains that we drive and fly every day? It was hardly conceivable. But instead of 18%, as the original 2006 United Nations report stated, a number of researchers, independent of each other, now have found that livestock can produce. It's possible that they could produce as much as 51% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions found in our atmosphere, mostly created by the respiratory carbon dioxide and the land use changes that they didn't account for in that first report, and methane production by these billions of animals themselves. It's not due to confinement or as a byproduct of factory farming methods. Most researchers now agree that the figure is minimally 30%. This is also without factoring in all the greenhouse gases emitted because of our demand to eat fish. All the fuel, refrigeration, processing, packaging, transportation, etc. Regardless of where the exact number resides, somewhere between 30 and 51 or more %, it's not 18. It's also not acceptable. It ultimately may be our demise as we fumble our way through blaming fossil fuels for everything. A perfect example of how this information is suppressed occurs every single year during our climate change conference, held originally in Kyoto with its 1997 Kyoto Protocol. And most recently, it was in November in Warsaw, Poland, where countries have come together and they're trying to solve this global warming problem, at least on paper, but none of this is being addressed. In fact, it's now being postponed. But it's very important for them and everyone else to understand that it won't matter how many light bulbs are changed out. It won't matter how many hybrid cars there are on the road if we don't first change out the way we eat. Well, nothing was really accomplished at Warsaw, no binding legal commitments consistent with previous conferences, primarily because the two largest emitters in the world, China and the U.S., don't participate. and the 200 countries that are in attendance, well, they can't agree on anything. So now the attention is turning to, at these conferences, to how we can all adapt to climate change, since it appears to be inevitable to them, that rather than putting forth the effort to mitigate it. Just like the nuclear warhead or bomb in this room, every aspect of global depletion has a timeline. It's not really a question of if we're going to run out of something, it's when. The most critical timeline of all, I think, is that of climate change. We only have a 3-year window of time from now to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or we're going to see irreversible warming of our planet. Most experts agree that if our planet's temperature increases just 2 degrees centigrade from previous historic levels, well, we're going to see catastrophic effects. Complete loss of island countries from rising seas, severe droughts, flooding, drastic storms. Whoa, gosh, I mean, some of that sound familiar? Well, that's because we're already more than halfway there to that 2-degree centigrade mark. In fact, the International Energy Agency has been quite clear about this window of opportunity for us to limit global warming, and that window closes at the end of year 2017. It sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? Should. Something everyone should be aware of. But what does this have to do with food? That's a good question, because we all believe that climate change is caused by the energy sector, right? Yeah, electricity, burning fossil fuels, especially coal. And that belief begins with Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it carries right on through articles such as this one by Bill McKibben, where he blames Shell Oil and BP and Exxon for climate change. They're the culprit. Well, they do have something to do with it, but whether it's with winning a Nobel Peace Prize or at an annual global climate change conference or with prominent publications, those with a platform have failed to mention or properly position the role of eating animals, despite its incredible contribution of nearly half the problem. To summarize the connection between food choice and climate change, we have this. Climate change is very real, it's worsening, and the situation's urgent. Greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, anthropogenic, significantly affect climate change. Raising animals for us to eat is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, as large or nearly as large as the energy sector. And lastly, any food movement away from factory farms, but including grass-fed or pastured animal systems, will not solve the problem. In fact, it's going to make it much, much worse. More land use changes, more deforestation, more production of methane, 40 to 60% more methane produced per one grass-fed cow as compared to grain-fed. Given the predictions of nearly every climate scientist in the world, our business-as-usual approach to climate change isn't going to work. Therefore, it's time we get outside the box, take the right action, and do it now. So what do I mean by take the right action? Well, looking at solutions, prescriptions, this is what we have. The first approach is what could be called the no worries approach, because, like my dad thinks, it's not real. Richard, there's no such thing as global warming. And, of course, the other approach is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, just like McKibben and Al Gore and everyone else recommends. But renewable energy infrastructure, such as building solar and wind generators all over our country to reduce climate change, well, that's a good idea. But it's projected to take at least 20 more years and $18 trillion to develop. Well, we don't have 20 years, and we don't have $18 trillion. So another solution to climate change would be we could stop eating animals today. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It doesn't have to take 20 years. Instead of $18 trillion, it costs nothing. That's the prescription to mitigate, not adapt to, but to mitigate climate change. Thank you. Interspersed throughout our discussions, you're going to hear and see a few themes, quite a few themes. One major one. One theme is how information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged. So much so that objectives of many important meetings like those climate change conferences and other organizations, well, those objectives aren't being met. And that all begins with the words we use. How clear are they? Are they conveying reality? These are all food movements that superficially seem to make sense. Right? Yeah, they make you feel as if you're going in the right direction because you're going away from factory farms. You're going away from processed foods. Well, that's got to be a good thing, right? Maybe. Maybe not. Do any of these words mean sustainable or healthy? Many would want you to think so. How about the word humane? Does humane equal sustainable? And if it does, which it doesn't, who is it that tries to define humane for all of us? Incredibly, there is one person alive today that the USDA and every humane certification organization in the world relies on for that one definition of humane. There's one person. Does humane even equal humane? This statement was taken from the food service section of the sustainability policy of UC Berkeley. I plucked it out of their policy. Their definition of humane raised, as you can see, is sustainable. One and the same. Imagine that. Also, take a look, please, at the logo across the top. It's pretty telling that their one snapshot depiction of sustainability is with energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Well, that being the case, we now know that half those wind generators should be replaced by the words no livestock, shouldn't they? That would be a bit more accurate for UC Berkeley, wouldn't it? And what does real food mean? I mean, I have issues with its precepts. Real food's a very large movement today. It's becoming larger and larger on the college campuses I'm visiting, and it's defined by being local, fair, sustainable, and humane. All four of those things. Well, that sounds terrific. So I brought a couple of food items with me that I thought I'd show you. One's considered not real food. No, it's not real food at all. This is a Vega bar. It's not real food because it's not local. It's made Vancouver, way over there. So, and worse, it's processed. I mean, it's all put together for you, but it does have sachi-inchi seeds in it. It has 4 different types of organic plant protein, really put together quite beautifully well. But remember, it's not real food. It doesn't fit their definition. Whereas this other food item I brought with me is considered real food. Yeah, actually, I couldn't get myself around to bringing the other food item. I used to do it, but it's repulsive. It's this food item. Over 17,000 chickens are killed every minute, every 60 seconds. 17,000 are killed every second, every 60 seconds in our country. I suppose that's pretty real. And if chicken, beef, pork, or any animal product is considered real food, what about these? Real food too? Sure, why not? They come along with it. And they're free. So unlike the Vega bar, this poor thing's considered real food because it's local, and the real food people think it's sustainable, healthy, and humane, but it's not. It's none of those things other than being local. Therefore, the real food movement is flawed because the definitions they're using are flawed, similar to every other food movement on this list. Just because something is local doesn't at all mean that it's healthy or sustainable or humane. It doesn't even mean that it should be eaten. The only thing that local means is that it's not very far from here. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Again, it all begins with the words we use. Are they conveying reality? This represents a food item that is constantly used improperly. We all know that. What is this? It's a protein, perhaps a rudimentary protein, but whether you're a bodybuilder or not, when you're thinking about eating protein, this is what you should be thinking about. As in, I need to get my protein today, right? Protein is not the little buddy looking over my shoulder here. That's my research assistant. Seems pretty obvious. And what about this group therapy session? None of these guys want to be called protein. It's most likely why they're in therapy. Right, Ricky? Protein is also not the guy on the left here. And yet that's what people are calling protein, aren't they? The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva that he always has. He's a cow. I mean, he shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right. And yet we do. In fact, his name is Plato. And what about this phrase? 15 million people heard Ted Danson proclaim his love of fish on Earth Day for the last few years and every other day since 1987. And yet he eats them. For all those years, now no offense to Mr. Danson, please, and maybe things have changed recently, but for him and 98% of all other individuals in the world, this phrase, I love fish, actually means this. I love to eat fish. Doesn't it? Yeah, that's what he really means. If he loved fish, as in loving his cat or his dog, he certainly wouldn't kill and eat them, would he? I don't think so. Again, thank you. Again, it's how we use our words, isn't it? In fact, Oceana's Objectives, one of the most influential conservation organizations in the world, their objectives were made very clear last year in an interview where their spokesperson, Mr. Danson, stated, it's not about saving the fish. It's about saving the fishermen. And that explains quite a bit. There are three principal ways our oceans are being destroyed, and all three are caused or at least heavily affected by our food choice. Raising and eating animals on land causes warming and acidification of our oceans, which are just trying to protect us. 90% of the excess heat added to Earth's climate since the 1960s, 90% has been stored in our oceans, which is triggering extreme weather events and killing sea life. More than 50% of all excessive greenhouse gases have been absorbed by our oceans, which has dropped pH levels by 30%, making it difficult for certain species to survive. Surface runoff from livestock operations on land has caused more than 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world, comprising 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of life. So any meaningful discussion of the state of our oceans has to first begin with frank discussions about land-based animal agriculture. But it is fishing that has the largest impact of all. Incredibly large amounts of sea life are taken from our oceans in three ways. First, they're taken as target fish. You know, that's the one you want to eat. They're also taken out of our oceans to feed other fish grown on factory fish farms, part of the aquaculture movement. And lastly, fish are taken as bykill due to the first two types of fishing. Oh, that really doesn't leave too much in our oceans now, does it? In fact, our oceans are being ravaged. Now, who here doesn't know that our oceans are being ravaged? Well, if everyone knows this, Why does everyone we know still eat fish? Fragile, interdependent, and poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. Over 90 million tons of fish were caught last year, with quite a few more millions of tons of bikill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught and killed and discarded in the process of trying to catch that targeted fish everyone's asking for. Bikill includes juvenile fish, all 7 of the endangered sea turtles, sea lions, birds, dolphins, even whales. I mean, come on, is that really worth it? This is embarrassing. Of the 17 major fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either overexploited or on the verge of collapse. 85% of all the world's fish species are affected, considered heavily depleted from overfishing practices. Well, that's quite a bit of damage. But along comes this word, sustainable, to justify continued harvesting. We can just stamp that word on anything, and then we can continue in the take mode, and we can feel good about it. Why? Well, because it's sustainable. Now, how is that word even used in the fishing industry? Who defines it? Who monitors it? And with less than 1% of our oceans being regulated, less than 1% of our oceans being regulated, who decides on enforcement? If you look at this carefully, the real answer is no one. And I say real answer because now there's sea life caught and labeled sustainable when in fact it's not. But it's still labeled as such by a number of highly respected organizations such as the Marine Stewardship Council or MSC. And there are many, many examples of this. Tuna, cod, pollock, haddock, salmon, krill, menhaden, hake. I mean, just so many. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, a highly respected organization, has lobster from the Gulf of Maine, both U.S. and Canada waters, not too far from here, listed as a good alternative. They've had it listed as a good alternative for years, but it's not. It never has been a good alternative for many reasons. Rapidly declining number of lobster, inefficient trapping mechanisms, and most importantly is the sad effect lobster trapping has on the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. There are only 400 of these truly magnificent creatures left that we haven't killed. And nearly all of them, 80% of them, are getting entangled, injured, and killed in those trap lines. We owe these whales and lobsters much more than this. Look closely, please. This young female North Atlantic right whale died shortly after this photograph was taken, found on a beach in Florida, essentially tortured, towing these lobster trap lines desperately along her migration route of over 2,000 miles from Canada, where she originally became entangled on her fins, on her body, on her tail, in her mouth, around her head. What a struggle this must have been for her. And this is not an isolated incident. It happens all the time, which is why I'm showing it to you. So eating lobster is sustainable for whom? Elsewhere in the world, there have been an estimated 500 miles of non-biodegradable fishing nets cut loose from fishing vessels each year. 500 miles each year for the past 25 years, catching countless numbers of unsuspecting sea life, essentially becoming depots of coagulated dead marine animals. You know, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is aptly named because that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching all this happen while promoting it to be continued. Each year, that's right, each year more than 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises are killed in fishing gear. This is just one of the many prices we pay for someone at your table or my table eating fish that's now labeled as sustainable. And so it is with fishing under the sustainable label. Target fish are becoming extinct. We move on to the next fish in line, creating serial depletion. And then other sea life up and down the food web are becoming extinct, all part of the collateral damage that begins with us. And what is this? Don't ask me. I only know a few things about it because the world's leading scientists don't know much about it. But that didn't stop it from becoming certified as sustainable. Now, how does that happen? How can something become sustainable when you don't know anything about it? Only we could do that. This is the Ross Sea toothfish. More than 5,000 tons are now caught per year. Many more thousands of tons caught illegally, and yet no one knows where they breed or spawn. As of last year, no one had even seen a young toothfish. And bluefin tuna represent all that we're doing wrong with our oceans. A little over a year ago, the ruling was made to not grant an endangered status to them, even though their numbers had dropped by 95%. They are already extinct in the Black and Caspian Seas. Yeah, they don't need any help. Instead of eating dolphin-free tuna, we should be concerned about eating simply tuna-free. This is an approved, sustainable method of catching tuna, in case anybody wondered. Coral reef systems around the world are in serious trouble. The Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral cover since 1985. Most would think it's due to pollution and climate change, which have something to do with it, but the primary cause of coral reef death throughout the entire Caribbean region anyway, and most of the rest of the world, is not pollution. It's not from climate change. It's from overfishing. An example in the other direction can be found in the Queens Islands off the southern coast of Cuba, where they haven't allowed commercial fishing. Their coral reef ecosystems today look the same as they have for the past thousands of years. One of the most important factors in balancing coral reef systems are predatory fish, or apex feeders like sharks, but we're killing them too. Quite a few of them. 1/3 of all shark species are nearing extinction. We're killing nearly 100 million sharks per year. Why? Well, 40 million sharks have their fins cut off, like this one, and then they're thrown overboard to die, so we can eat shark fin soup. It's terrible to see this, isn't it? But I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, I don't eat shark fin soup. No, not me. And furthermore, it's banned in 8 states in our country, including our state of New York, which happened last year. So that's nice to see. So congratulations. Well, isn't that great? But, again, over 98% of us do eat fish. And by eating fish, any type of fish, we're doing this to 60 million sharks that are caught each year and killed in fishing nets and fishing lines as bykill. So go ahead and ban shark fin soup all you want. But why stop there? If you're truly concerned about sharks, you should ban fishing. Killing krill now has become a very big business, but you don't need to eat krill to get your omega-3s. You don't need to eat any sea life to get your omega-3s, unless, of course, you listen to Dr. Oz. Oh, yeah. However, krill is fundamental to the survival of almost every animal species in and around the Antarctic. Krill numbers have dropped by 78% since 1980, in turn affecting the decline of a number of penguin species and making it very difficult for baleen whales such as blue, right, and fin. A large pod of pilot whales, 22 of them, beached themselves in the Florida Keys a little over a month ago. The cause of death was most likely malnutrition, since it was found that they had no food in their stomachs. These whales eat mackerel, herring, and lots of squid, all of which we fish to an overexploited state. There are hardly any left. This is a perfect example of the cascading effect we have on other life as we continue to eat sea animals, taking away the food supply from other species that actually do need to eat squid. The most heavily killed fish species in the world is the Alaskan pollock, harvested at a rate of 3 million tons per year, and yet it's still labeled as sustainable. Now, who would think you could take 3 million tons of any species from anywhere on Earth and think they wouldn't be missed somehow? Now, here's the point regarding our oceans. It's no longer a problem of overfishing. No, that was way back in the mid-1800s. It's about fishing. Whole Foods, Walmart, Wegmans, Compass Group, Aramark have pledged to phase out Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch red-listed seafood in the next couple of years. At the end of the day, though, it's not really about a pledge from big business. No, it's about how accurately the word sustainable is being defined and then being used. Well, no worries, because now we have fish farms. 49% of all fish consumed worldwide are produced from aquaculture, which is growing faster than any other food sector. One reason for this tremendous growth is the very false illusion of environmentalism. Asia now produces 91% of all farmed fish in the world. Shrimp, tilapia, carp, with the vast majority of operations being completely unregulated. Here we have another interesting idea where fish are caught in our already ravaged oceans to feed other fish, produced on factory fish farms, sometimes at a ratio of 20 to 1, in the form of fish, fish meal, fish oil. 88% of all fish oil produced in the world is now given to these fish farms. Very soon, we will run out of fish in our oceans, and we will likely run out of land to raise livestock. So we could be turning to this, a more closed-loop system of aquaculture called aquaponics, a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics that grows both fish and plants. Businesses are already snatching up abandoned industrial warehouses in many urban settings. This happens to be in Chicago. Raising fish in tanks, growing vegetables with the wastewater, and then cycling it back to the fish. But they all use massive amounts of electricity. They use an incredibly massive amounts of feed inputs, and these are essentially adulterated forms of plant-based hydroponics or aeroponics. Regardless of where the fish on your plate comes from, now or in the future, is the process of catching and harvesting and then slaughtering fish, is that process humane? And if it isn't, then why do we do it? Does anyone know what nociceptors are? Especially polymodal nociceptors. They're sensory receptors associated with feeling pain. You have them. Most mammals have numerous polymodal nociceptors in and around their face, their head, their neck. So do fish. Last year, Cornell became the first Ivy League school to be MSC certified sustainable. Quite a distinct honor, would you say? Yeah, that's right. Cornell has now joined other distinguished health-conscious organizations such as McDonald's, which was the first fast food chain to be MSC certified. Both examples of just how far away we are with steps toward true sustainability. All researchers that are unbiased economically or politically will tell you that there's very little we actually understand about our oceans, that there's an infinite line of connection, a complex web of intertwining life and ecosystems supported by our oceans. It's infinite. Has the fishing industry accounted for and then devised a calculation of this infinity? That's not what I learned about infinity years ago. In reality, there's no such thing as sustainable commercial fishing. With continued warming, acidification, and deoxygenation, our oceans that we once felt were so robust will very soon be unable to support what few life forms remain in and around them. So the timelines for our oceans look like this. This is not science fiction. It's not something I made up on the way over here. It's reality. And quite sadly, this has happened on our watch. You're looking at what we created and then now are passing on to future generations. In fact, what we need is complete and immediate restoration of all oceanic ecosystems back to a balanced state where pluses and minuses occur naturally, not controlled or manipulated by our wants or by an organization influenced by money, which they all are. We want to eat lobster. We want to eat Alaskan pollock, so therefore, they're sustainable. The magic pill to heal our sick oceans is not magic at all. It's really quite simple. Just leave them alone. Our rainforests are still being lost. 25 million acres. 25 million acres just last year by a combination of deforestation and degradation. An area of tropical rainforest the size of a football field is destroyed every second. That's beyond tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like because the world's food priorities are with eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the sad result, the burning and bulldozing of rainforests. Soon, grass, pasture, and cattle and crops to feed them will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the U.S. or anywhere else, you're supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. Brazil announced a little over a year ago that deforestation in their country hit a 24-year low. They were all celebrating. But what does that really mean? Because they still cut down 2,000 square miles of rainforest during that 1 year period of time, just in Brazil. And tropical deforestation rates are increasing in Bolivia, Peru, Malaysia, and numerous other countries in the world, including Brazil again. 80% of all rainforest loss in the Amazon is due to raising cattle. with another 10% lost due to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. And remember, these livestock are grazing. It's not a matter of factory farming. We've already lost numerous ancient tribes, over 90 of them, shaman, undiscovered medicinal plants, and millions of living things. We'll never see them again. They shouldn't be lost because of our inappropriate choice of foods. By the year 2050, most rainforests will be gone. And the few patches that remain will have already been way past their tipping point. This, of course, means that all the millions of species that originally lived in these rainforests will be gone. Their once abundant water systems will be destroyed. And, of course, their oxygenation and climate regulatory mechanisms that we all count on will be lost for the next few millions of years, which is how long it took these rainforests originally to develop. And we've wiped them out in less than 50 years. It's quite easy to quantify our global depletion of land with far too much of it being used for the wrong purpose. I mean, you can see this just about everywhere. This is how much land is being used to raise livestock. 45% of the entire land mass on Earth. Now, how ridiculous is this figure? Well, it was documented by the International Livestock Research Institute. So most likely this 45% figure was underestimated. In the U.S. alone, nearly 78% of all land used for agriculture is used in some way to support the animals we eat. But listen to this. There are 90 million cattle in the U.S. today, 70 million pigs. Only 3% of all those are being pastured, only 1% of all livestock in general, and yet we're still using this much land. If we factor in public lands for grazing, livestock account for 97% of all land used for agriculture in our country. It's simply terribly inefficient. You can produce 15 times more protein from plants as you can from meat on any given area of land. You can produce anywhere from 5,000 to 45,000 pounds of plant foods on 1 acre of land versus 480 pounds at best. That's stretching at best of meat or animal products on 1 acre, regardless of what Joel Salatin and the polyphase farm proponents will tell you. It's shocking, knowing just how much land on Earth is used for raising animals, how terribly inefficient this really is. There are nearly 1 billion people suffering from hunger. This year alone, 6 million children will die from starvation. How does that all relate? Well, 82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food is fed to animals that are then killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries, such as the U.S., U.K., and Europe. 1/4 of all grain produced by third world countries is now given to livestock in their country or out. Now, to be sure, world hunger has many layers of complexity. One of the larger reasons is tied to poverty. But another significant factor is the looming shadow of our current demand to eat livestock and fish, which is indirectly tied to poverty. In fact, eating these animals ultimately affects food prices, food availability, policy making, and even suppresses education to improve agricultural systems in developing countries. In 2012, there was considered a record harvest of grain in the world, 2.6 billion tons. But half of that was fed to animals in the meat and dairy industries. 77% of all coarse grains produced in the world now go to livestock. We can't blame climate change then. Droughts or flooding for the world's food security issues. Most of our food's going to the wrong place. Solving world hunger, though, is not as easy as simply giving them the grain that would normally go to livestock. That's always been an argument, hasn't it? Solving hunger in developing countries, I think, demands a multi-dimensional approach to sustainability, establishing it on many levels, simultaneously with organic plant-based food systems at the nucleus. The model for success at reducing hunger in developing countries, I believe, should look like this. There are over 2 million NGOs in the world, 1 million of them conducting humanitarian efforts who are not lacking good people who want to do good deeds, and care packages of food are necessary as a short-term acute patch. But all that's not going to solve world hunger. They don't need more handouts. These people need the tools to create sustainability for themselves, long-term and through many layers. More than 80% of the population in most developing countries, especially Africa, are rural subsistence farmers living in poverty and illiteracy. So these are the layers of sustainability that can be achieved for them. all centered around a purely plant-based, soil-rebuilding, climate change resilient system. Therefore, no livestock. We're losing other species on Earth at an unprecedented rate. With such a loss of biodiversity, plants, animals, and insects, that we're finding ourselves in a whole another era of large-scale extinction, the sixth extinction. The current view of most scientists is more related to the rate of extinction rather than the exact number. That we're losing anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times the background rate, that which we've seen for the previous several thousands of years, which used to be 2 to 4 species going extinct. So why all the extinctions? And what are we doing about it? Nearly all concerned researchers agree that the primary cause of rapid biodiversity loss we're witnessing on our planet today is by pastured and grazing livestock operations on land, loss of habitat, and by unsustainable fishing practices in our oceans, loss of habitat. There are only 300 Mediterranean monk seals left in the world. What we are doing to other forms of life on Earth is unparalleled in the history of our planet, where one species, us, is causing the mass extinction of nearly all other species. It reminds me of this somewhat well-known and very appropriate comment that if all insects on Earth disappeared, within 50 years, all life on Earth would end. However, if all human beings disappeared from Earth, within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish. One of the most pressing concerns that we have today regarding sustaining our life and future life on Earth is our supply of fresh water. We don't have much, and we're using all of it. Now, sure, it's a regional issue, but aquifers and wells are already drying up. There's a growing gap between worldwide demand for water and what's really available. With so much demand, there's expected to be a 40% shortage in water supply in just 15 years. Now, what you decide to eat has every single thing to do with this. Scientists are very concerned about water scarcity, but I think it's more a matter of water management. Instead of focusing on technologies, we should be first looking at choices. Is this a good choice? How about this choice? Are any of these good choices? As compared to say these. Do you know that it requires more than 400 gallons of water? More than 400 gallons of water just to slaughter one cow or one pig, grass-fed or not, in addition to these other figures for the act itself. And we slaughtered 145 million cows and pigs last year just in the U.S. Much of our fresh water is not fully renewable in our lifetime, and it's certainly not infinite in quantity. An area of tremendous misuse of water and land combined is in the state of California, where, among other things, they use 900,000 acres of land to produce alfalfa. That's not alfalfa sprouts. It's alfalfa. That's a staggering amount of land. Anyone here from California? Yeah, well, why do you do that? Why do you do that? Because it requires 1 to 2 million gallons of water per year to irrigate just one of those 900,000 acres. And guess what? They all get irrigated. Every one of them. Every acre. It's sadly true. So guess where all that alfalfa and water in its use? It goes to livestock. 5% to horses, the rest to livestock. 75% to dairy cows. Although water on Earth remains constant, the consumptive form it happens to be in does not. 4 out of 5 people now live within 30 miles of a water-damaged area, meaning soon to run out or polluted. There are nearly 300 transboundary river and waterways on Earth where multiple countries share vital running water supply. As we see water shortages occurring over the next 15 years, we will surely see droughts, famine, human sickness, and then we'll see conflicts, social unrest, and even wars. Indeed, those living downstream will be fiercely battling those living upstream for their water rights. Climate change will make these matters worse, but not cause them. Food choice and virtual water trading through food, especially animals and animal products, will play a much, much larger role than energy or fossil fuel use. Well, the average household in our country uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year, according to the EPA. Indoor use, about the same outdoors. That's quite a bit of water. And it's what we're focused on in times of drought, how to reduce this. The average person in our country, though, consumes 206 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 46 pounds of pig and 58 pounds of cow, 102 pounds of chicken and turkey, in addition to the 248 eggs and 616 pounds of dairy products, which equates to 405,000 gallons of water per person per year, just to support that animal product diet. So now, a more accurate view that the EPA should be aware of and broadcast is that every household of 3 people in the U.S., well, they use over 1 million gallons of water in 1 year. Not 50,000. 1.2 million gallons. And 96% of that outrageous water use is from their choice to eat animals. So whenever there's a drought or water shortage anywhere in our country, which there are, and certainly will be, does our government or your community ever step up and declare a state of rationing or eliminated meat or dairy? Why not? Why shouldn't they? So then, these are the timelines for fresh water. And it's not anything that we can feel comfortable with. Over 90% of the world chooses food that's unhealthy for them and for our planet. And here's some of the reasons why. All are significant, but most overwhelming is the powerful combination of cultural and political interactions. We begin solving this with a massive and swift education campaign, and we need to reverse the trend of tiptoeing around this subject by the media and by other authors and by other educators and by many of the new food movements where we get most of our information from. Thank you. You know, I mentioned earlier that buying local has little to do with sustainability other than from an economic standpoint. I mean, it's a solid, very solid idea to help nearby farmers, but in fact, transportation is only responsible for 4%. 4% of all the fossil fuels used and all the greenhouse gases emitted in the entire food production process. It's much more relevant to view this a different way, the cradle-to-grave assessment. Instead of greenhouse gases, which are important, what are all the detrimental effects to get those food items to our plate? To calculate that, well, you've got to go back to where these food items begin. You've got to go back to their origins. Using a life cycle analysis, you'd see very quickly that eating non-local but all plant-based foods have minimal sustainability concerns versus eating animal products produced by your next-door neighbor that contribute these percentages to the many aspects of global depletion. An important part of our solution process will be the development of new agricultural systems. Community-supported agriculture, farm-to-table, small and local farms, real food, slow food, organic, biodynamic, traceable, urban agriculture, all only make sense if they don't involve animals. Eventually, the wealth of any nation will be redefined in terms of natural resources and strength of its sustainable systems. Our survival will depend on how quickly and accurately we begin to define this word sustainable. We'll see sustainability become a growth opportunity and a risk management strategy for businesses, essentially transforming economics. Futurists ask, what one new idea will change the world drastically in the next century? Well, will it be new nanotechnology? Maybe. Transhumanism and robotics? Traceability within businesses, or even renewable energy systems? In terms of ensuring our existence, that one transforming idea that futurists are asking about is for all humans on Earth to eat only plant-based foods. And then there's our pitiful farm bill. Sorry, but I don't know another way to describe it. It was locked up in political disagreement and indecision and then sequestration. What a tremendous opportunity this was, and still is, for our country to solve a number of problems we have, ranging from our fiscal cliff to our climate change cliff to our healthcare crisis cliff. In many ways, they're all the same cliff. It's been frankly difficult for me to watch our policymakers over the last year spend so much time and our money trying to construct policies based on the improper definitions of the phrase healthy food. Many of the major changes that were proposed for this bill were aimed at taking away economic support from factory farms and giving more to small farmers, thinking that by itself will produce healthier food. It won't. Essentially, it'll be shifting funds from large meat and dairy operations to small meat and dairy operations. That's never going to work. So I have another solution dealing with accountability, which will get us on track much quicker, and it's what I call the eco and health risk tax. Now, you're all familiar with the nutrition fact label. This happens to be ground beef or ground cow, something the average consumer would purchase. And on this label, you can see that half the calories are from fat. And most of those are from saturated fat, and even a gram of trans fat and quite a bit of cholesterol. Now, all that's not so good. But you don't see not so good anywhere on the label, do you? I don't. It also has quite a bit of protein, but it's of the type of protein that's implicated then in a number of disease states. And you certainly don't see what resource it took to produce whatever's inside that package. Well, consumers need to know this. So we introduced the eco and health risk factors. And in the event that these numbers are a little too complicated, we simply do this. We put a little notation on the bag, and it could say not so good or not a good choice, or in the future, when all this becomes voice activated, a little Siri voice, a little Siri voice could pop out and say, slap your hand and say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. That's not a very good Siri voice, but this is a good start, but it's most important to reflect these factors into costs. Now, this is not a carbon tax. It's not a soda tax, which would vastly understate the problem and therefore wouldn't work. It's an eco and health risk tax, something we've never done before, because the true cost to our environment and to our own health, which is invaluable, has always been externalized. It's never been directly paid for, with our heads always turned in the other direction. We'll eventually need to develop this top-down taxation approach to our decisions about food very soon, as well as a bottom-up or grassroots educational approach for a number of reasons. And eventually this might happen, establishing a shame-honor relationship with eating meat, using mass cooperation as a norm. Now, this is one of the questions of our future, this as well as aquaculture. It's a topic that's gaining momentum, and I find it's a natural path for most people wanting so badly to hang on to the false sense of needing versus simply wanting to eat animal products. It's a path of least resistance. Let's look at a couple different ways to answer this question then. Oh, there you have it. That's one way to answer it. I mean, he thinks so, and so do many others. My thought, though, is that we need to be fully aware of the consequences of our food choices, not partially aware. And we need to understand what we're doing to all areas of global depletion. And we need to know the magnitude and the urgency of the problem. You know what? This is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem. So let's take a look at another way to answer this question, at how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. To do this, I think it's time to go to the very essence of the problem. If we gave everyone in the room 1 acre of land, which might be difficult to do where we are here, but let's give everyone in the room 1 acre of land to grow any food you choose. What would you grow? What sounds good? I like it. Yeah, what should you grow? At all my other college and university lectures, the students know what they want to grow. I haven't figured out what that is yet, but it it probably should be it probably should be, yeah, it is. It probably should be the male hemp plant. And remember, we're talking about food here, but on this 1 acre, you could try to raise 1 grass-fed cow, just like that, thinking it's fully sustainable, just like that New York Times multiple-time best-selling author is telling everyone. But in most areas of the world, 1 acre is not enough. You're going to need 5, 10, even 20 acres for that 1 cow. So you'll have to borrow some land from somebody. You've already lost the game. Or you could kick the cow off, and no offense to the cow, and plant something like this. You could plant just plants. You could plant on half your acre, you could plant this. You could plant any one of a number of plants, thousands and thousands to choose from. Kale's a good example, though. Provides you with much needed micronutrients, fiber, 62 to 70 phytonutrients, things you can't get from any body part on that cow. When looking at global growing applications, how cool is this? Plants like collard greens and kale and many other greens actually continue to grow through extremes of temperatures, from -5 degrees here in my backyard through 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And after you pick the leaves from kale or collard greens, does anybody know what happens? They grow back. Yeah, they regenerate. Ha! I bet your cow can't do that. And on the other half an acre, you could plant quinoa or kamut or buckwheat or amaranth or, all ancient grain power foods. You could plant potatoes, beans, fruit. There's so many plants to choose from. So there you have it. If you use your 1 acre for a grass-fed livestock, you'd end up with 100 to 400 pounds of a food type that's then implicated in numerous disease states. And along the way, you produce 3 to 4 tons of methane and carbon dioxide, and you've used minimally 30,000 gallons of water just for that animal to drink. In most cases, you're going to use 1 million to 2 million gallons of green and blue water for that one cow. Or instead, if you use your acre of land to grow something like this combination of plants we're talking about, you produce 20 to 50,000 pounds of food that's infinitely healthier for you to eat and for our planet to grow. It's literally astounding what you can produce on that 1 acre over the period of time it takes to raise your one grass-fed cow. It's quite an amazing difference, isn't it? And now imagine extrapolating that model out, or variations thereof, in terms of global use of our resources. And now answer that question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. That's what I'm asking here before I was dismissed from the farm. No, I wasn't. And for those who still think that eating any animal is sustainable, then it's time to introduce this concept: relative sustainability, or optimal relative sustainability. That'll work. How sustainable is it to raise and eat any animal product in a relative sense as compared to plant-based foods? How can we best use our resources? What foods will have the very least effect on climate change? Which foods best promote our own human health? And which are the most compassionate? This is the way we need to start viewing things, in a relative sense. So for me, it's not really at all about how or even if a certain food item is cooked. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm much more concerned about where that food item came from, which lives and resources it took to get that food item to our plate, and then, of course, what effect it has on us afterwards. That's what's important. Now, isn't this a beautiful countryside scene? Beautiful blue skies and green grass and rolling hills. This happens to be in the northeast section of Victoria, Australia, where I was researching the ecological effects of their food choices. And instead of seeing beautiful blue skies or green grass, I like taking a closer look at things like this. So here's what I see in this photo. I see this: depletion of land, air, food, water, inefficient use of our resources. It's happening here as quickly as anywhere else in the world. And I also see something else, which is the main reason I visited this specific area to research. I mean, lock in this area, or this view, for just a moment as we advance. We're going to leave this area. We're going to just get out of the car and go down the road a few hundred yards and get off our bikes. And this is what we see. This 1,000-year-old forest is what that cattle ranch used to be. And it was the home to numerous insects, plants, and animals. There are 3 different types of eucalyptus trees growing here, and one animal in particular that I was looking for, which is now endangered due to destroying its home. It's this little guy. All of his family members were killed. Thousands are each year. He now lives in a small, remote rescue area in that forest, and he represents species everywhere on our planet that are being devastated by cattle and other livestock operations on land, fishing in our oceans, lack of awareness about food choice, and politics. In fact, koalas are predicted to become extinct in just 20 years. It's quite sad, and that's what I see in this view, whether it's in Australia or in the United States or anywhere else in the world. Now, about the Go Meatless on Monday campaign, presuming you're eating meat the rest of the week. If you do this, if you go meatless on Mondays, you'll be contributing to climate change, pollution, global depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health on only 6 days of the week instead of 7. You'll be creating a false justification for your actions on those other 6 days of the week. In other words, let's not rest on the laurels of what you're doing right only 1/7 of the time. And baby steps. What are those? I think it's time we do away with baby steps. Because that's right. Because we're in fact not babies, are we? If you think about it, all of us are quite capable of taking big person steps right now. And our planet and all the animals on it shouldn't have to wait with repeated and ongoing assault until we get this figured out. What does eating less meat really mean? Just in the 1 hour I have been speaking here this morning, from 9 to 10 o'clock, actually 9:15, 9:20 to 10:20, in 1 hour, over 8 million animals were slaughtered for us to eat during that 1 hour. 114,000 tons of grain were fed the livestock that we're raising. But during that same hour, 684 children in the world have died from starvation. 6,000 acres of tropical rainforest were destroyed and replaced by cattle or crops to feed them, and over 4 million tons of greenhouse gases have been dumped into our atmosphere by livestock. Therefore, I'm advocating a much different approach than what Mark Bittman and others suggest when they state we should eat less meat. Because with that approach of eating less meat, only 7 million animals will be slaughtered in the next hour. Only 113,000 tons of grain will be wasted, leaving only 683 children in the world that will starve to death in that 1 hour, and only 3 million tons of greenhouse gases will be emitted by livestock. Isn't that what less means? So unlike Jamie Oliver or Mark Bittman or Michael Pollan or all other eat less meat advocates and food gurus that we're all hearing, I think those numbers should be zero. I sure do. And absolutely. Thank you. And it's easily attainable. There's no magic involved. Nothing has to be invented. No new technologies have to be employed. It's simply with what we choose to eat. And now we're going to take a look at the food service section of the policy of sustainability for the entire University of California system. Why? Well, because this is a perfect example of how efforts of well-intentioned individuals and institutions can be so very far out of alignment with reality because of the definitions they're using. So you tell me, is this sustainable? Is this a sustainable policy? What about the items I just highlighted in orange? Are those sustainable? How about the primary objective of 20% by the year 2020? Who thought of that? Is that sustainable? Where does this policy fit in terms of relative sustainability? Or are these merely baby steps that happen to affect 500,000 students, faculty, and staff, and millions of animals and our planet? And it's not much better on this with campuses on this side of the country, is it? I took this right off the dining services website at Harvard. Pretty cognizant of sustainable food systems there, aren't they? And here's another campus on this side of the country that could certainly use some enlightenment, serving a pig roast as a celebration of the Yale Sustainable Food Project. Really. And close to home here, with nearly $3 billion in endowments. You'd think that NYU could afford to increase its level of food choice awareness. This climate action plan document is nicely written. A lot of effort went into this, except it doesn't mention food choice anywhere. It doesn't mention it anywhere in this 80-page document, so how sustainable are their attempts going to be? And it looks like at NYU they plan to wait 25 years to integrate a full mission of education about sustainability. That'll work. So even at these prestigious universities, West Coast, East Coast, and everywhere in between, they would certainly benefit from understanding and then adopting a more accurate view of sustainability and then translating it to their students, our future leaders, and to do it now. And one more important definition that needs refinement, ethics. The ethical consideration of what we choose to eat. The topic of conscious eating has always been about animal rights, animal welfare, hasn't it? Yeah, the life and death of other living beings that we consume, how they're treated. Ethics has always been about this. But I think it's time to view conscious eating or ethics in a much different and a much larger context. Is it ethical, for instance, for any of us to eat food that causes the extinction of other species if we don't need to? Is it ethical for the vast majority of humans on Earth to cause irreversible, or at least contribute heavily to irreversible climate change, loss of ecosystems, and resource depletion, while 2% of us are living our lives through our food choices to protect Earth? Is it ethical for any of us to use our planet in a way that exacerbates world hunger and extracts the potential for future generations to survive? Is it even ethical for 310 million Americans to impose their diet-related health care costs on the 5 million or less who choose to eat the right foods? So you see, it's time we rethink ethics. It needs to be framed much differently than just with animal rights or animal welfare, which is fine. In fact, one of the chapters in my new book, which has just been published and is available now, one of the chapters in my next book is titled, "Why Should I Pay for What Everyone Else Decides to Eat?" Really. And if we don't change fairly soon, well, the animals are going to take matters into their own hands. Look out. Look out. Here they come. Almost everything we do, every decision we make, every day, is based on our culture, what we've learned, what someone else has told us to be acceptable or necessary. After realizing that bloodletting here wasn't so healthy for us after all, we miraculously stopped, even though we've been doing it for more than 3,000 years. There are culturally driven practices we are accepting today, especially with food choices involving all animal products, that are much more unhealthy for our planet and for us than bloodletting. And by all counts, we don't have 3,000 years to get it right. A number of organizations and governments are quite concerned about how we're going to feed 9 billion people expected to inhabit Earth by the year 2050, because global demand for food, including meat and dairy products, will double from what it is today. So they put together a high-level expert forum to explore solutions, this being one of their solutions. You know what? They're absolutely right, though. Livestock does hold great importance. The less we raise, the more secure food will be. And according to the United Nations, these key problems need to be resolved in order to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050. Throughout this last hour, we've effectively answered these questions for the United Nations, haven't we? Anybody here from the United Nations? Thank you. Well, wasn't this fantastic news when we all heard about it from National Public Radio a little over a year ago, that Americans are eating less meat? The results of this NPR poll were snatched up and broadcast on websites everywhere. We're finally making progress, right? No, the whole story, as usual, wasn't told. Although we ate 1.5 pounds less beef last year per capita, our country still produced, meaning we raised, slaughtered, and packaged over 2 billion pounds of beef 1 year. And even if the U.S. is eating less beef, 1.5 pounds less beef in 2013, consumption and production of all other animal products in our country went up. The U.S. now consumes more turkey per person than any other country in the world, and our yogurt consumption is up 400%. Globally, there's been a 50% increase in consumption of animals and animal products just in the last 15 years. Beef production and raising cattle is predicted to increase 5% each year annually over the next 6 years, while poultry production is expected to double. The demand to raise, slaughter, and eat animals is hardly believable. Last year, the 1-year figures look like this. So you call that progress. And what exactly does the phrase eating less meat mean here? A ton less here or there? And if we really try to change someone's diet and we try to make them eat healthier, look what happens. Yeah, well, we're not doomed yet. But at this stage, one would have to ask, what are all the conservation groups doing about this problem? You know, the ones we give our money to. Are they telling their 40 million members to stop eating animal products? Hardly. Certainly these groups must know about the global depletion food choice connection, and they're doing something about it, right? No, the answer is they're not. All these groups are concerned about climate change, no problem there, but none of them, not one of these groups, has made a statement about the profound effect eating animals has on our environment, despite the fact that it does, and despite the fact that we've entrusted these groups to preserve and protect our planet. Where's all of our donated money going? There's a superb documentary about this very problem that'll be released quite soon. Please check back on my website or Facebook or Twitter for some updates. Aside from those conservation groups who are clearly in the dark, there are a few researchers and a few organizations that are quite aware of the dire predicament that we're in and the very short timelines we're faced with. Any of these folks will bluntly tell you that our species is in a state of unsustainability and that we can't remain on this course for very much longer. It's not just me. But not one of them is connecting that final dot. Not one of them. They continue telling us that our survival is in peril and we need to change. But change what exactly? And they make it very clear that we should all stop over-consuming and overproducing. But over-consuming and overproducing what? Again, fossil fuels and waste are very easy targets for them to point their fingers at. There's a serious failure by these experts, all tremendous researchers, but they just can't get themselves around to recommending that final move to a fully plant-based diet. Why aren't we getting the truth from those with platforms, those who are guiding us? It's because of three reasons. First, many are comfortably unaware, like those conservation groups. And those that are partially aware, such as those researchers, simply can't get themselves around or can't bring themselves around to making the right statement because they themselves consume animals. After all, how can we expect one of our leaders to guide us toward health and restoration of our planet if they can't even do it for themselves? And lastly, many of our leaders are afraid. That's right, they are afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their audience, and they're very afraid of the powerful meat, dairy, and fishing industries. They're afraid to do the right thing while we slowly sink. We're only here on Earth for what could be considered a fleeting moment of time, and yet we can do this much damage to ourselves and to our planet, to future generations because of the choices we make. Ask yourself and those around you, and have them ask this simple question on a daily basis. Is the food we're about to eat in the best interest of all living things? Regarding sustainability, then, please picture 2 points in time and space. Point A is where we currently are as a global community. Point B is where we need to go, the point of true sustainability. Now, we're very far away from point B, and there's a vast sea of challenges between the two. Most businesses and individuals, policymakers, organizations in the world are getting on board a very large, powerful ship at point A trying to get to sustainability, but their navigators don't know how to get to point B. Their compasses are broken. Their GPS systems aren't working, which is very dangerous because all those on this large ship think they're going to make it to point B, but they won't. They're floating around further and further from it in a zone that I call pseudo-sustainability. And worse, there's a narrowing timeline before point B will be too far away, and they'll never make it. Now, a few of us sitting on the dock at point A can clearly see point B, and we know how to easily get there. We could probably just hop in and swim there. But here's the kicker. We can't get there by ourselves. Getting to the point of true sustainability, point B, is a collective effort. We have to move the critical mass. We have to take all those on board that other large ship with us. We need to travel together and quickly enough, or none of us are going to make it. That's the way sustainability is. Therefore, our leaders, those steering that very large, powerful ship with most of the world on it, our leaders need a new navigation system. Some argue that it's unrealistic to ask the global population to eliminate meat, dairy, and fish, not only as a functional change, but behavior psychologists would suggest that we not even use words such as eliminate, stop, or don't when advocating change in food choice or any type of change, because that's too negative. It creates barriers such as feeling of infringement of individual rights. So, instead, many suggest to use the approach of kindly asking everyone to please begin replacing or begin substituting animal products with plant-based alternatives, because you shouldn't tell anyone that they might have something taken away, or to stop an unhealthy habit even though it's adversely affecting them and everything and everyone around them. Don't infringe on their individual rights. Really, is that so? Just where would you use the words replace or kindly substitute here? You know, I understand the importance of empowerment through the spoken word, but at some point in time, the seriousness of a situation must dictate an action to be taken, regardless of what words happen to be chosen. It's time we switch out whose rights we're worried about here. Knowing everything I've talked about today, there's certainly ample reason for feeling quite discouraged, isn't there? Anyone feeling discouraged here? Yeah, sure, I understand. Regarding loss of our planet's life systems, what we've done to our planet, there's so much bad news around us. And even with increased awareness, it seems we'll be constantly fighting an uphill battle. But in the midst of potential despair, there can be found great news. The bomb in the room doesn't have to go off. We can spread the word and we can defuse it. There's an easy solution to global depletion and most of climate change. We don't have to destroy our planet or ourselves to eat. In fact, it's the other way around, but we must change. And it is a choice. We need to eliminate, substitute or replace the practice of raising, harvesting, slaughtering, and consuming animals. It must be comprehensive in scope, and we must do it now if we want to save lives, including our own. Now, there's great news in all this, because the food choices that are optimal for our planet's health, as you know, happen to be the very same food choices that optimize our own health. You know what? We could all be heroes. That's right. All of us. We could even be superheroes. Swooping down and saving lives and saving our planet with every single thing we eat every single day. Yeah, a superhero. I'm feeling better already. Thank you. You know, something quite telling happened at the end of the annual Global Climate Change Conference that we talked about earlier. In her closing remarks, the executive secretary of the conference, Christiana Figueres, provided a summary of the conclusions of 200 nations, NGOs, researchers, by stating this about our future, about greenhouse gas emissions, and about climate change. She said this: "The science is unquestionable. Therefore, despite the obvious effects on the industry itself, we must call for the elimination of the use of coal as an energy source. And we must do this immediately." Now, notice that she didn't say anywhere in there, she didn't say that we should use less coal, or for us to use only local or humane coal. I'm pretty sure I didn't hear her say that. And I also didn't hear her say that we should all go coal-less on Mondays. In fact, she said we should eliminate coal, even though coal carries with it only a fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions that raising livestock does. And coal has no real direct effect on water scarcity, world hunger, loss of biodiversity, and all other areas of global depletion, but raising and eating animals does. So, the door has been opened, hasn't it? Perhaps inadvertently by Ms. Figueres and 200 nations. But as far as I'm concerned, the global stage for massive food choice change has been set. If there is an imminent threat to our planet and to us, which there is, well, we should certainly be able to call for its elimination and for it to be done immediately. So I encourage and challenge everyone to become more aware about your food choices, seek more accurate definitions, understand the timelines, and appreciate the ticking cancerous bomb that we're faced with. And then let's all commit to making a difference. But not just in our own health or our own life. No, let's commit to making a difference in someone else's life. And let's commit to making a difference in the long-term health of our planet. But let's do it now, not later. We might not have a later. And let's think about making a difference every single day of the week, not just on Mondays. Be the compass. Be the superhero for those around you, guiding them and the ship they're on to point B before that door closes. That, my friends, is what sustainability and positive change to achieve it is really all about. With that in mind, let's all of us here in this room right now, Let's all of us go out and inspire others to become aware. Thank you so very much. You're a tremendous audience. It's a tremendous event, and it's certainly been, thank you. It's certainly been my privilege to be here. Thank you. It's a real honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank you.